What's going on, everybody? We are back. Episode number 157 of the Club and Sub podcast. Tonight, we're going to be talking about UFC 295 taking place in my backyard, Madison Square Garden. Also, in our guest tonight's backyard, Madison Square Garden. I'd like everybody to welcome. We got Mike at Mike's MMA Picks. Mike, how's it going tonight, man?
Welcome aboard. Appreciate you having me on today. Looking forward to breaking down this fight card. And, you know, when you have a fight at Madison Square Garden and there are multiple title fights, fans are tuning in, the stakes are high, emotions run strong, and opinions vary. I'm looking forward to getting into it with both of you when we break down these fights. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, guys, as usual, if you like the show, please drop a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. It would help us out. You can find me on Twitter, John at MMA Fox, Danny at Danny Lags at Danny_Lags. Could never get this right. But yeah, we'll skip the recap from last week. So we got three of us and we got a big card to get into, and we'll just jump right into it. First fight of the night, we got Denis Bazooka. He's plus 220, taking on Jamal Emers, minus 260. Mike, what are your thoughts here?
You've got a hometown fighter. I expect the crowd to be popping, especially when we have Serra-Longo fighters competing. And Emers, I think at this stage in his career, we know what we're dealing with here. He is a jack of all trades, but he's fundamentally sound, but he has been prone to make some big-time mistakes. He had Sabatini in a lot of trouble there, right? And here in this spot, I see Bazooka being a bit limited. He had his chance against Woodson, didn't get the job done, but look at the reach situation there. I think that was a major factor, and also taking the fight on short notice. You got to see a little bit of what Bazooka was from his Contender Series bout. I don't think we've necessarily seen the whole package. I think it should be a competitive fight. I don't agree with the line that Emers is sitting at about minus 260 or so right now. So I don't have a very strong convictive play in this spot. I think that this could potentially be Bazooka's time to shine. I'm not going to be backing him with my hard-earned money, though. I think that Emers, the fight against Jenkins, we saw it went to split decision. He can go all 15 minutes. He can fight to his strengths, and he does have wrestling in his back pocket as well. But I have a feeling that with Serra-Longo getting these guys ready, I think that he's going to show up, and I think this is going to be much more competitive than what the current line indicates. What's your take on the fights, guys?
Lags, what do you think?
So, I mean, I definitely agree with Mike a little bit to, trusting Emers as a near 3-1 favorite is, not the easiest on your stomach for sure. But I do feel like Emers has him pretty covered. I feel like the length, the reach on the feet, I think the volume as well. I think much more volume on the feet as well as the grappling upside too. So I think decent size favorite makes sense.
It's an interesting fight, and it's one I actually considered betting Emers when the line plummeted yesterday, but it's since moved back out. I thought about it pretty deeply because I do rate Emers' skill set. I think he's a decent striker. As you mentioned, jack of all trades, Mike. But one could also say master of none, to be honest. And, it's something where I feel like he's more technically skilled in every aspect of MMA. I think he's a bit more tested. I feel he does make bad decisions, though. Like, I don't really trust him to go to grapple here. Ironically, I kind of think if Bazooka goes to grapple, it's very likely to result with Emers getting on top of him because Emers is a very, very good counter grappler. But I almost feel like if Bazooka just gives him a striking fight, he'll take it. And while I favor Emers considerably in that kind of a fight, I just think he's the better fighter here. What bothers me is we've seen now multiple times in this guy's career that the judges just don't like the way he fights. I thought he beat Jack Jenkins. I bet him in that spot. I thought he beat Giga Chikadze. I bet him in that spot. But the truth is, he doesn't really put stamps on rounds ever. He's kind of happy to float on the outside, come in, let off a quick combo, and that's it. But he's not throwing with much impact. And because he's never putting stamps on rounds, it kind of leaves a lot of these rounds open to the interpretation of, say, one hard shot. And so while my gut instinct is he should really be fine here and should really roll, You touched on the crowd. That's concerning. It's in Bazooka's backyard. And just I just don't trust this guy to take the path of least resistance. I think Emers is going to win this fight. I think he should win this fight. But I also do not really want to trust him with my hard-earned money.
One thing I also just wanted to mention, Bazooka is still only 26 years of age, where on the other side of the fight, you have Emers who, in my eyes, he's a finished product, I got to say. So that we may see some continued improvements from Bazooka. That's just something I wanted to add.
And he's at a good gym with a good training room, whereas Emmer is not really at much of a gym. The guy's had some injury issues. He hasn't been the most active fighter prior to this year. I mean, I think all that. I know people on both sides of it, but I mean, happy to pass for me. But I'm going to kick it to you again here, Mike, because you are, as they say, the flyweight whisperer. We got Josh Van. He's minus 220. Taking on Kevin Borges to come back there, plus 185. Any strong thoughts here?
Okay. Yeah. Initially, I was contemplating a play on Van. And when I went back and watched some of his regional footage, and he's all offense, reminds me a lot of Adrian Yanez, the way he I see some big holes in his game that could potentially be capitalized on here. And you're talking about a fighter who's only 22 years of age, right? So he hasn't really been tested under the bright lights here. And in Madison Square Garden against Kevin Borjas, who, I mean, these Peruvian fighters, they've come in to bang. He's a long fighter. He's somebody who's going to fight hard for your money. You saw, I believe, against Diaz, he was a significant underdog, if I'm not mistaken, in that matchup. Came out the other side victorious. I like the length of Borjas, and I think that we are in for a firefight here. It wouldn't surprise me to see Borjas come out of this fight the winner. And Josh Van, I will say this: the killer instinct, that's something that you can't necessarily teach. And you watch all of his highlights, even the way the fight against Zalgas, that was very impressive. To pull that off for 15 minutes, the way he did against a seasoned veteran, that spoke volumes to me, especially at only 22 years of age. So this is a fight that I don't have a bet on this fight, I got to be honest, but I don't agree with Van being above minus 200 at the betting window. I think that he's hovering, what is it, minus 220, minus 225 or so.
Right now.
Line's coming in just a little bit. I think Borjas is live here, to be honest. I'm not going to come out and outright pick Borjas because I have to see some more footage of him, and I don't necessarily I don't have firm belief that he's going to be able to take the strikes of Van if Van is able to clip him, because then all bets are off. You have a Van who sees red, and similar to Yanez, the way he closes out fights, this kid Van in Madison Square Garden could come out here and just shine. But I will say, Borjas, when I watched the fight back, his regional footage also, he's impressive. He's impressive. I think this is a young fighter too, 25 years of age also. So yeah. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to pour myself a nice ice cold beverage, and I will be observing this fight, and I'm going to hope for chaos. That's what I'm going to hope for. What do you guys see?
Lags, hit us.
Well, I will be doing the same as Mike and also sitting back and enjoying a nice cold beverage here watching this fight, because I think, kind of like what he mentioned, I believe both of these guys are pretty unproven. But I do think that Van is the better striker of the two, higher volume and more defensively sound. So I understand why he's a decent favorite again.
I mean, I thought Mike did a very good job and succinct job of breaking this down. I'm a fan of Joshua Van, especially being that he's 22 years old. To your point, Mike, I also think there are a number of holes in his game, in particular defensively, that'll likely catch up with him in short order in the UFC. But I mean, that's nothing you wouldn't expect from a 22-year-old in the UFC. I expect we'll probably see improvements from him every fight. Borjas, I don't really like his game very much, but he does come to bang, to your point. He's tough, he seems durable, and he throws with like real intent on his shots, which I do like. Like if you're not going to have great defense, show me volume and intent. And he does both of those things in spades. So I do kind of think these guys are going to come out here and throw down hard. The one thing that has me just leaning to the Van side and thinking the line is maybe not right, but it deserves to be near the minus 200 range. I do think Van could potentially get some grappling going if he needs to at some point. I don't think he's the best grappler, but Borjas his hips seem kind of weak to me, and he seems a bit clueless once he gets down to the mat. So it's hard to project Van to proactively grapple, but when that hole is there combined with Van, look, the bottom line is he went in there and fought in his debut a guy with 8 UFC fights who had competed with a lot of really tough fighters, and he won that fight. He's already shown me he can dig deep, in a UFC fight. I haven't seen that from Borjas yet. I think it's going to be a firefight, but I'm leaning to the Van side myself.
It'd be interesting to see if the grappling gets tested, because Borjas, like you mentioned, he's not necessarily going to come out here, and I don't see him pursuing takedowns. I think we're going to see these two guys bang it out.
Yeah, same. Moving on, Lags, throw it to you here. We got Kung Ho Kong. He's taking on John Castaneda. Current line, Castaneda minus 141. Comeback on Kong, plus 121. What are your thoughts?
It's an interesting fight. We were actually talking about this right before we came onto the pod, and obviously the elephant in the room would be the weight. No, I shouldn't say weight miss, but the weight alteration. This fight's now at 138 pounds, and it's because of the Castaneda side. But that aside, to me, if Castaneda is not proactively grappling here, I think it's a pick 'em fight. So honestly, give me Kang here. I think I'm probably going to end up with a small 1-unit shot on him.
Yeah, I think it's a fairly interesting bout. And Kung Ho Kong is a guy I've backed on a number of occasions. I had him in his last fight against Christian Quinones, which I was happy to cash. But, on rewatch of that fight, and even live, he knocked Quinones out, but he looked really wooden and rickety to me early in that fight. He got wobbled pretty bad, too, before he clipped Quinones. So I don't know how much stock to put into it. Kang's 36 years old. I do think from a skill perspective, he can match Castaneda's skill for skill. But one thing in particular kind of stands out to me, and that's like Kang's stand-up it's very much based around the jab and the outside calf kick. And Castaneda is a guy who likes to fight southpaw quite a bit. And, you can have success with those tools against orthodox southpaw, but it's a lot harder. And so I think his offense standing is going to be a bit more muted. I kind of think the grappling is going to neutralize itself. And I just ultimately, I like Castaneda's aggression. I like his output. I like the way he pressures. I think Kang can hold up under it, but he's 36 years old. I thought he looked like he was declining a bit in his last fight. And, Castaneda is a tough guy who just comes in there to bang. I lean to the Castaneda side, but it's not going to be a bet for me. Mike, what are your thoughts?
I still can't get out of my head the Hanayaya fight. That's something that really I can't shake that off. And when you watch Kang, he's primarily going to sit at range and strike. And in the Kennedy fight also, that's something that sticks with me as well. Here, Castaneda, we know he can push a pace. The Gafarov came in and gave him everything he had, pushed it, wasn't able to. It ended up being a very competitive fight, and you saw what Said Nurmagomedov did to Gafarov there. This fight, it's interesting, John. You bring up the weight implications here, and that it came from the Castaneda side. So, is he looking to utilize that to his advantage to grapple here? Because that is his path. He could push a pace, grind out a decision here. I'm going to be picking Castaneda here, and the thing is, I don't like the way Castaneda absorbs strikes on the feet also. And so it's a closely lined fight, but I'm leaning towards the Castaneda side.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on, I have my biggest bet of the night here. We got Jared Gordon. He's taking on Mark Madson. Current line on Gordon minus 185. The comeback on Madson plus 160. I bet Gordon big here. I bet him to win 3 units at about minus 170. I still think the line is pretty good where it is right now. If you've watched this podcast for a long time, I'm a Jared Gordon fan. Obviously, I had my heart ripped out against Paddy Pimblett last year, and also my wallet in that fight was not very fun. But look, ultimately, I think Gordon's a guy who gets a bit undervalued throughout his career because he cultivated a reputation for being chinny early in his career because he was finished 3 times in 4 fights. What no one talks about is that those finishes came at the hands of Diego Ferreira right before he tested positive for steroids, Charles Oliveira, and Joaquim Silva in what was an absolute war for 15 minutes. Since then, his chin's looked more or less fine. Jared Gordon, pretty good fighter, good boxer, keeps a pretty high pace, pretty credentialed grappler. I believe he's a black belt under John Danaher now. And look, the guy's just got a ton of UFC experience, ton of wins in the UFC, and he's taken on Mark Madson, Olympic wrestler. But I know he's 4-1 in the UFC. I just don't really rate a lot about Mark Madson's game, to be honest. His striking is very wooden to me. We've seen him, he barely edged Clay Guida in a 15-minute striking fight. In his last fight, he fought Vince Pichel, was able to control him in round 3 to pull that fight out of the fire, but was largely getting outstruck for that fight too. We've just more or less seen with Madson, if he can't just control you easily, he just doesn't have a lot of answers on top of having a very poor gas tank. And in this fight, I think he could get takedowns if he really wants to against Jared Gordon, but no one's controlled Jared Gordon in his career without putting a body triangle in. It's just not Madson's game. I actually think if Madson takes him down and a scramble happens and Gordon ends up on top of him, it would be very, very bad. We've seen now Madson on bottom and it doesn't look good, whereas Gordon is a fairly decorated grappler himself. And so ultimately, I just have to side to the Gordon side pretty big here. He's going to have a huge output edge on the feet. I think he's a much more technical striker. I think he's the better grappler, and the gas tank advantage is just gigantic. You couple that with Madson being 39, I think Gordon should be closer to minus 250 in this spot. Mike, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think we talked about the whole Bobby Green headbutt situation. That's something that has a lot of, there's some trepidation out there. I'll say that, folks who have been concerned about playing the whole concussion thing. But then I go back to, as DFS players who've been at it for a long, long, long time, I remember Hakran Diaz, the way Gordon kind of ran through him for 15 minutes and kind of picked up the pace the longer the fight went. And then something that really stuck out to me, I went back to the Joe Selecki fight. And I was on Joe Selecki against Jared Gordon there. And I was very impressed with Jared Gordon's, not only his takedown defense, but his resiliency, the way he didn't wilt getting caught in that body triangle and having multiple submission attempts applied to him. Marco Madson is no submission grappler. He's not going to come out here looking to lock in an anaconda or something here. But the silver medalist in the Olympics, that's something to speak of. And it's interesting how he fights not to make mistakes, and he fights Madson at range with one strike at a time. And I agree with you on this play. I actually also played Jared Gordon here heavily. I think the largest play I've made this entire year is risking 3.5 units, and I have 2.5 units risked on Jared Gordon here, and I may potentially add more depending on what we see at weigh-ins, because I know traditionally Jared can have a tough time there, and Marco Madson at 39 years of age, you're not necessarily sure what you're going to get. And I know we also haven't mentioned the whole fight ready thing, and that there were some reasons that he ended up leaving, and they weren't necessarily due to a falling out. It was due to the healthcare and other issues. So I agree that that Jared Gordon is the rightful favorite here. And we also haven't mentioned that this is his first fight in New York at Madison Square Garden. And I believe that we're going to see a tremendous performance. Now, I will say, I remember the Carlos Diego Ferreira fight. I believe that somehow Gordon took that fight after he was in that altercation in front of the storefront where he cut his hand very badly, and he posted pictures of that. But also the fight against Neto BJJ, that was an all-out war. And I was on Gordon pretty heavily in that bout, and that Oh man, that burst my bubble. That was a tough pill to swallow that night. So
you know what people forget about that fight is he tears his hamstring at the end of round 2, and he's basically a sitting duck for all around 3, like literally couldn't move,
Yeah, and he can grapple. And I remember I was on a podcast with Tom Breeze a long time ago, and I remember him raving about Jared Gordon and what he brought to the table. And gosh, what the heck happened to Tom Breeze, right? But my bottom line, I'm in agreement with you on Jared Gordon here, and I think that he has the cardio to break Madson down the stretch late. I will say this though, I was on Vince Pichel to beat Marco Madsen, and that was another one that didn't go my way. So is it going to happen this time? I think the stars are in alignment here. I think that this has a decent shot at hitting, and I'm going to be playing Jared Gordon.
What are your thoughts, Lags?
As Mike closed it there, the stars have aligned, and all 3 of us are going to be on Jared Gordon for this weekend. But yes, no, Jared Gordon is also my biggest play of this card as well. I have 3.4 units to win too. I mean, the pace, the pressure. I mean, the gas tank is huge as well for Jared Gordon. I mean, you guys touched on pretty much everything. I don't really need to rehash it. Jared's a much better striker on the feet. I don't think Madson's going to be able to hold him down. I think this is Jared's fight. I think round 3 finish is definitely live on the table as well. Let's go, Jared.
Yeah, let's go, Jared Gordon. Moving on, great fight here. Start with you here, Mike. We got Nazim Sadikov, another guy from Sarah BJJ. He is taking on Vyacheslav Borchev. Current line, Sadikov minus 122. The comeback on Borchev plus 102. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah. Oh, fantastic fight. Fantastic matchmaking. And Slava Claus comes into this fight, and you know exactly what he brings to the table. He's going to have the larger octagon, ready to roll, ready to land his strikes, get in, get out. But the problem here is that he does have a tendency to get caught. And Mark Diakese was able to exploit him. Mike Davis was able to exploit him. And I believe Sadikov can come out here and cause Slava Claus some fits. Borchev, it's not like defensively he's some ingenious out there. He gets rocked in many of his fights.
Yeah.
As clean as his offensive striking is, he does get caught when punches come back at him. And I watched Sadikov win the Elder fight, the McKenney fight. That's another fight that I know folks were complaining about, I believe, a fence grab in that matchup, but he utilized some solid fight IQ. And I think that what we're seeing nowadays is that, unfortunately, in the Nathaniel Wood fight, folks get away with 2 or so point deduction worthy fouls, and he fought to his strength. So, and I think the fight being in his backyard also lends itself to the New Yorker getting the job done here. I am going to pick Sadikov here.
How about you, Lags?
Yeah, I'm going to lean Sadikov's way as well, just because of the potential grappling upside. But to me, I just need to see more of it. And that's why I'm just not going to go out there and lay minus 135, minus 140 on it. But I understand why people are playing him here.
Yeah, I bet Nazim small. And to your point, Mike, if Sadikov doesn't grapple at all, like I probably favor Slava slightly. But kind of to your point, the guy gets hit a lot. He's not someone, he's going to get bite down and brawl too. And so my view is kind of, if they strike, I think Slava's a slightly better striker, but I like Nazim's pressure. I like his gas tank a lot more than I like Slava's, to be quite honest. And, even in that outcome, it's like, yeah, I probably won't feel good about my bet if he doesn't go that route, but it's going to be a competitive fight, I think, if they strike for 15 minutes. On the other side, if he does pursue grappling here, I know he's a good grappler. I've talked to guys in that camp. I've seen his grappling when he's on top. He's going to get him down. And quite frankly, I think Nazim's a lot more dangerous from top position than, Mike Davis and Mark Diakese are, the 2 other guys who took Slava down. And so the way I'm viewing this is, on the one hand, he has a path that potentially could make him look like a -3 to -400 favorite here. Will he take it? We don't really know. Surely with that camp and with those coaches, they know exactly what he should do to win this fight. So I'm hopeful that he will. But on the other side, you have what is probably a competitive fight. But I feel like you have to cap both of those things into potentially happening here. And so just with the upside of him potentially coming out and looking like a gigantic favorite if he takes the path of least resistance, I feel the line's got to be a bit wider than minus 122. I personally felt like minus 160, minus 170 made a bit more sense when you account for the uncertainty of whether he'll grapple or not, combined with the certainty of if he does grapple, he's probably going to maul him. So yeah, it's a small bet on Sadikov for me. If he doesn't fight to his strength here and comes out and strikes with him, I won't be shocked. But in my opinion, the grappling hole is wide enough that I just the line can't be this short. Moving on. Interesting fight here. Well, not that interesting. I take that back. Short notice fight. We got Mateusz Rebecky. He's taking on Roosevelt Roberts. Rebecky originally booked against Narulo Aliyev. I had bet Rebecky in that fight. Unfortunately, Aliyev had to pull out. Roosevelt Roberts steps back in, gets re-signed to the UFC, and he is a plus 475 underdog, taking on Rebecky, who is minus 650 here. Lags, any thoughts here?
Not many thoughts at all because this matchup has recently been put together, but I think it's definitely a tough matchup for Roberts to step in on tough notice for sure. I mean, nonstop wrestling with Rebecky, big strikes on the feet. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this fight. I mean, look, if you want, I don't really think you can make a coherent case for Roberts in this fight. If they just stood in boxing range for 15 minutes, sure, he could win. He's got a nice crisp jab, decent combinations, but the problem with Roberts is the same problem he had in the UFC before. He doesn't have he just doesn't have the kind of stopping power to really back guys off of him. So when guys want to go forward on him, they don't really worry about what's coming back at him because it's just he's not throwing very hard. So they do. And once you get inside on him, he just doesn't have much there. Not great takedown defense, decent guillotine, but like I don't anticipate him being able to get Rebecky in a guillotine here. It seems very, very low percentage. And just in general, even if Rebecky stands with him, Roberts could jab him here or there, but I think he'll struggle with Rebecky's kicks hard. And the hardware difference between the two is night and day. I can't see him standing up to Rebecky's firepower, and I think Rebecky should be able to ground him more or less wherever he wants. I think this should be Rebecky fairly easy. How about you, Mike? Any thoughts?
I know that Ignacio Bahamondes knockout loss. He wants to get that. Roberts wants to get that out of his mouth. That was a tough pill to swallow, to leave the UFC on that note. Oh man! And the other thing I got to mention, Roosevelt Roberts. He has one of the strangest frames I've ever seen. When you watch him at weigh-ins, look how narrow his shoulders are. I don't think I've ever seen a fighter with shoulders that narrow. And Rebecky, this guy's built like Michel Prazeres. When you watch him go out there, he's like a little tank, and he has an incredibly short reach, but powerful nonetheless. Great motor on Rebecky. I also was looking forward to hammering Rebecky in the matchup that never came to fruition here. Man, tough matchmaking for Roosevelt Roberts. What does he have to do here? It's going to be, he's got a big hill to climb, to be honest. I like the guy. I've backed him in the past, but I think that unless he lands a dramatic knockout or lands a guillotine, it's going to be tough to pull that off. Rebecky, he's the goods. I think that, what is he, 31 years of age? So it's not like he's like a 34 or 35-year-old here. Rebecky, the arrow's pointed up here. I think that he's got a full training camp behind him also. I'm going to be pulling for Rebecky, but does he get it done inside the distance? That's the question. Wow, I have a hummingbird in front of me right now while we're doing the podcast. It's pretty wild. All right, sorry about that.
No worries.
I wasn't sure if it was a large bumblebee or something, but it was a hummingbird. Okay.
Moving on, we got Lupita Godinez. She's taking on Tabitha Richi. Current line, Lupita Godinez minus 175. The comeback on Richi plus 150. I initially had put 4 units on Godinez at minus 160. I then added to it at minus 130. I added 2 units. I de-risked some of that this morning because the more I thought about it, I said to myself, do I really want to have 6 units tied to a WMMA fight. So ultimately, what I come down with here is I have 3 units to win 2 on Loopy here. Basically, average price is about minus 150. I think I like her quite a bit in this spot, though. The truth is, look, Richi's on a 4-fight winning streak. Everybody seems to like her and like her game. I am not overly impressed with it. She is fast, good lateral movement, gets in and out relatively smoothly, but I don't think her wrestling is very good. I don't really think her top game is very good. I think she lacks physicality in spades. And even on the feet, the only real decent performance she's had standing was Jillian Robertson. And like, people forget in that fight, Robertson won the first round striking with her, and the third round was competitive of that fight as well. Yeah, I mean, and Jillian Robertson, look, I am a fan of Jillian Robertson because I really like her jiu-jitsu and her top game, but she is not a quality striker. And so for Richi, for her to win fights in this division, she's got to be able to dominate on the mat, in my opinion. Like, there's not many fights for her like Jillian Robertson, and she's been very fortunately match made to that degree so far since her debut, obviously, where she got Manon Fiore. But I mean, since then, Maria Oliveira, who had nothing off her back for her, she fought Polyana Viana, who outstruck her pretty handily on the feet, but Polyana Viana has a penchant for playing guard and not getting up, which lost her that fight. And then she got Jessica Penne in a retirement fight. And like, I look at Lupita Godinez, and look, people talk about her fight IQ, and that's always the big concerning thing with her, is she never seems to want to fight to her strengths. But I don't think it really matters that much here, to be quite honest. Like, you look at the women Lupita Godinez is beating, and it's just a different level than the people that, Richi's beating. She lost a very close decision with Angela Hill, where she was striking with her competitively on the feet for 15. Beat Cynthia Calvillo, beat Emily DeCote, both of whom are much better strikers than Tabitha Ricci is. And even if you want to go back here in time, she fought Loma Lukbunmi, and, the best case for Ricci to me in this fight would be her potentially being able to get multiple takedowns. But, Lukbunmi is one of the better clinch fighters in the division, and she got out clinched by Godinez in that fight. And so I look at this fight, and it's like, yeah, Ricci could get a takedown or two, I suppose. I really can't see her holding Godinez down, though. Up against the fence, Loopy digs underhooks really well, very good at turning those positions. She's going to be much stronger. I can't really see her pinning Loopy to the fence there. And at range, maybe her speed, she can point fight a bit with Loopy, but Loopy does a really good job of picking her shots. She throws a lot harder. She's a much more skilled boxer. She's got very fast hands herself, and she's just much more dangerous. Like, I've seen Richi get outlanded at distance by Maria Oliveira and Polyana Viana. So I'd be a bit surprised if she outlands Loopy on the feet. But even if she does, it's still a large hill to climb for her, because the power gap is just going to be very, very substantial here. So, I mean, I think Loopy should be a decent-sized favorite in this spot. I bet her to win 2 units. Mike, what are your thoughts here?
I agree with almost everything you said. We also haven't mentioned the camp change here.
Yeah.
The going to Lobo. I believe that that's a big factor here as well. You saw her get back to her strengths. The way she completely manhandled and annihilated Elise Reed in every facet of the game, and she had more to push. She had deeper to push. And Tabitha Ricci, she has a very high compete level. I will give her that. Yeah. She will keep moving forward, and she will pursue the takedown to the nth degree, and she won't stop until she gets it. So that's something that I give her credit for. Also, Ricci does have a decent gas tank, and we've seen in the past Godinez kind of falter down the stretch in a few fights, and the hands, I mean, it's night and day. Obviously, Godinez has much heavier hands. She's able to throw for volume, whereas you have the almost a Caitlin Chikagan-esque sounds that Tabitha Ricci makes while she's throwing her strikes, and they're 1-2 combinations. Basically, she's trying to create space for her opponent, between her and her opponent. They're not actual strikes meant to damage anybody. Yeah. I don't think that Godinez is in any danger on the feet whatsoever in this fight as far as the striking realm goes. But if this fight does hit the mat, do I have some concern that Ricci may establish top position and burn significant time? Yes, that's a concern. But I go back to the camp change. I go back to the Carnelossi fight. After she won that fight, something that doesn't get talked about enough is when she took the Angela Hill fight, she was dealing with a serious hip injury. Somehow she got cleared to fight, and that's why she didn't use her wrestling in that bout. So I agree with the play and the pick on Godinez here. I think that she has multiple paths to victory, and she's got to watch out for the submission. That's obviously Richi's path. The control time on top is something that I am concerned about, but the pick's going to be Godinez.
Lags, how about you?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think if anybody's going to have wrestling success, it's going to be Loopy. And like you touched on, John, a little bit, even if she doesn't wrestle and this just stays standing, I feel like minus 150, minus 160 is about right for Loopy standing. More volume, harder shots. So, yeah, I think the line's about right.
Fair enough. Moving on, Mike, I'll throw it to you here. We got Steven Ersg. He's coming back off a big win in his debut against David Dvorak. He's taking on Alessandro Costa. Current price on Ersg, minus 193. The comeback on Costa, plus 168. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah. Oh, man. You know, the Alessandro Costa, who is he? He seems like almost a Nova Nhau Brazilian, almost like a gas bag, somebody who's going to come out and he throws heavy punches to the body. Reminds me a little bit of John Lineker, the way he explodes, the way he was able to just annihilate Jimmy Flick. I mean, I'd say 95% of the roster at flyweight takes Flick out of there. So it didn't tell me that much. And to get outstruck by Amir Albazi, that is a concern of mine. But then you go watch back the Costa fights on the regional scene, and he spends a lot of time on his back, which is a concern of mine. I try to avoid fighters who will stay on their back unless they have a very dangerous submission game that they use to escape positions and then use that as offense to get back to their feet or what have you. But here, Ersg he's got a wiry frame. He has a solid gas tank. He does not give up on himself. Granted, do I see him eventually getting cracked and dropped on the feet? I could definitely see that against Costa here. I don't have a play on this fight. It's interesting. I don't have plays on either of the men's flyweight fights on this specific card. But man, now Ersg was supposed to fight Matt Schnell, right? That was the fight. Now I was gonna play Ersg against Matt Schnell because of Schnell's, even though he's very talented, he just finds ways to lose. And we've seen it against Nicolau, so many others. And the Muderji's fight, we were both in attendance for that one, right? That was incredible. Props to Matt Schnell for that one. But in this matchup, I do agree that Ersg should be the favorite. I think that he's a grinder, and he has a second or third round finish I could see on the table for him, a submission victory or ground and pound here. The problem is, though, Costa, I mean, he's only 27 years old. I don't believe he's a finished product. I don't believe we've necessarily seen the entire arsenal from Costa. And I know he does have a solid guillotine, but Ersg's going to be the play. And I agree with the bet on Ersg. The striking defense is a concern for me. The lack of physicality from Ersg. That's something that he seems to weasel himself way out of positions where he could potentially get out grappled, but he comes out the other side victorious. So you got to love that.
Lags, how about you?
Yeah, I like Ersg here too. Much longer on the feet, more volume. To Mike's point a little bit too, Costa just seems like a Brazilian brute-ish, just very powerful, winging hooks on the feet, not a ton of volume coming back from him. And like he touched on as well, plays off his back a lot as well. I think there could be some grappling upside too. So I like Ersg here.
Yeah, I bet him at minus 150. I think the line now is probably about right. The thing is, Costa has some decent physical attributes, as you guys touched on. Very physical, seems fast, throws hard. He is very short, though. He's given away a lot of height and reach in this matchup. Something I kind of noticed with him is he doesn't really do a great job of closing distance. Like, he doesn't have a great way of feinting in or setting up combos inside. He kind of just wings hooks to try to close distance, but it's very, very predictable. And as you touched on, Mike, watching, Amir Albazi just kind of jab him up with no problem. Albazi's a talented fighter, but I don't particularly rate his striking personally. And that was kind of alarming to me. And So I watched back Ersg against Dvorak, and that's a very impressive win on short notice in your debut, in my opinion. Dvorak, he's a very tricky style to deal with because of how unpredictable he is on the outside and how he times engagements. And I was pretty impressed with how Ersg managed to manage distance in that fight when Dvorak would close in. Like, I don't love Ersg's head movement, but he seems to understand that he's tall and long and understand how to use that. And against a guy like Costa, who doesn't set up his entries into the pocket too well, I think he should be able to do that and mostly keep him at an arm's length here and land, a fair bit. I also think if they do get entangled in the grappling, I don't really think Ersg is likely to have much wrestling upside here. I actually like Costa's takedown defense, but he is a very slick back taker. He does get to dominant positions very, very quickly, which I like quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, look, ultimately I favor Ersg just because I think, minute to minute, he should really cruise here. The one thing I worry about is his head is kind of stationary and he could potentially, get lamped in an exchange. But yeah, I favor Ersg a lot here. I bet him here. Moving on, Legs, I'll start with you. We got Pat Sabatini taking on Diego Lopes. Any thoughts here? Sorry, my son is calling me.
No, you're good. So actually, I'm honestly just waiting on the line movement here because it looks like it's going to flip and that Pat is actually going to go dog. And I like the Sabatini side here. I actually think that he can land takedowns. I think that he can stay safe in top position. Not to say that Lopes is a guard sub or bust kind of fighter, but I don't rate his striking too much. It's not that technical. He does hit pretty hard, but I should say that he's going to find himself on his back a large portion in this fight. So I like Sabatini on the money line, and I'm just going to be holding out until it goes dog. If not, I'm fine with taking it to pick him.
Gotcha. I'm looking forward to hearing John's take on this one because I have a hunch he's on the Sabatini side. I believe we were also both in attendance for the Movsar Evloev fight.
Yes, we were. Yep.
Against Diego Lopes. And that fight, granted, I think Movsar was minus 900 headed into that matchup.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks were impressed with the submission attempts and the multiple minutes that Lopes was spending on his back. That is a reality. And when you're spending multiple minutes on your back, you're typically losing the fight. That being said, Pat Sabatini, very impressive grappler. He's a local guy. So initially I thought he's going to have the crowd on his side, and he might early in this fight. But what I've noticed also in the fight with Evloev, Lopes had a way of winning over the crowd. And I know that here, Sabatini, I was on him against Tristan Connolly in Sabatini's UFC debut. I have a lot of respect for Sabatini and what he brings to the table. And also the fight against, was it Almeida that he fought last time out, right? He went right to the grappling, and you saw how much that victory meant to him. He stuck to his strengths and came out to the other side victorious. He has no problem not deviating from what got him to the big show. So I suspect he's going to come in here, try to initiate a takedown attempt and look to fend off any type of submission that may be coming his way. But I will say this, the stand-up of Sabatini, it's not there. The especially the striking defense and the Emers fight, and we've seen many other fights throughout the course of his career where he can get lit up on the feet. And I'm not saying that Lopes is something to write home about, but he's going to be the much bigger, stronger fighter here with a significant edge. I think personally, I think that the cardio here is going to favor Lopes in this spot. And I have a feeling, I know this may come as a surprise, but I have a feeling that Lopes is this is going to be a dogfight. I think this is going to be a much closer fight than we're expecting. I think that folks are expecting Sabatini to just establish side control, be heavy on top, look to fend off submission attempts, and then come out the other side victorious. But I think this is going to be much more dangerous than the odds are suggesting. And I have a feeling that Lopes is going to come out victorious, either through the stand-up on the feet also. I think that the Lobo fight team, like I mentioned earlier, between Alexa Grasso, Lupita Godinez, and Lopes here, who I believe is the jiu-jitsu coach down there also for a lot of these fighters too. So he's doing a lot of great work. And I think the arrows pointed up here. I am on the Lopes side. I think that I understand a lot of sharp folks are on the Sabatini side, and I respect that also. But I think that Lopes is much more live than we're talking right here. But I want to hear, John, your take on what you have here, because you seem like you have some conviction in this play.
I do like Pat Sabatini quite a bit here.
John, your volume's up a little bit, I think.
It's up? What do you mean it's up?
Yeah, you're real high. Like you're real loud now compared to what you were before.
Hold on.
Maybe that's just me.
Am I now still?
Good. Yep, good. Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I do like Pat here quite a bit. And, I mean, I made a big mistake trusting 37-year-old Gavin Tucker against Diego Lopes in his last fight off a long layoff. Obviously, he got caught quickly. And I'm going to say the same thing that I said before that fight that I was wrong about, which is I would be surprised to see Pat get guard subbed in this kind of fight. Obviously, that did happen to him sort of a while back. If you go back to his fight with James Gonzalez, he got put in a straight arm. It was actually very bizarre. He got put in a straight arm lock. I don't even think he realized he was in danger, and he pulled up, and his arm just completely snapped on him. But, he's a very, very good submission grappler, D1 wrestler, about as decorated as it gets under Daniel Gracie. This fight's interesting because, to Mike's point, I agree that I think Pat's in big trouble on the feet. Like, my biggest concern in this fight is him, entering the pocket sloppily and just getting clipped, because Lopes sits down on his punches. He plants and he sits down and he hits pretty hard. And I don't think Pat is the most durable fighter in the world. But what I do think, and I think where this fight will ultimately be decided, and I think I don't think that's much of a hot take, is going to probably be on the ground, because Lopes doesn't mind going to his back. He likes doing it. He's obviously very, very dangerous from there. And, one of the reasons I like to bet Pat, I bet him in his last fight against Lucas Almeida, is Pat Sabatini knows where his bread's buttered. He's like a Darren Elkins, he knows he's not competing with these guys standing. He wants to get the fight down to the mat, and that's what he's going to do. And so I expect him to do that. The question really becomes what happens when the rubber meets the road on the mat. My view is Pat's very, very heavy on top, and unlike some of the other guys who have had a lot of trouble with Lopes, he does tend to pass aggressively. He doesn't like to sit in his opponent's guard, which is really where Lopes tends to be at his best, in guard. It's where he can do, the most things, throws triangles up his arm bars, whatnot, sweep from there. And Pat likes to pass. And so if he can pass, I think he can really dominate from those positions. Lopes does have very, very good guard retention, but something I noticed, which ultimately moved the needle for me in a big way, is if you go back and watch Lopes against Brito, Brito takes him down against the fence early in that fight. And when Lopes was against the fence, he just didn't really have the space to operate, the way he likes to from his guard. And Brito had a very easy time in that round holding him down. And, Pat, one of his preferred ways to get people down is to kind of push him to the fence and then work trips off of there. And I think that benefits him a lot in this fight if he can make that happen. For one, because it'll take him pretty much immediately to half guard. But for two, it'll leave Lopes in a space where he has a lot less room to work and potentially threaten Pat in this fight. But ultimately, I lean the Sabatini side because I know he's going to go out there and fight in the manner that is optimal for him. I could potentially be wrong about how the jiu-jitsu goes, but my own personal view is his top pressure and his ability to play jiu-jitsu on top is better than Lopes's off his back. And I think he's ultimately going to be able to ride him out here. I think Lopes could threaten him a lot early in this fight, but I also kind of think Pat once he kind of gets used to him and feels him out and feels where he's moving from position to position, if he gets through the opening minutes, he'll be able to start moving to dominant positions himself. But it's a fascinating fight. I like the Sabatini side here. Me and Mike going head to head on one.
Hey, it happens.
It happens. But I'm going to throw it to you again here, Mike. I'm going to let you start off with another New York boy. We got Benoit Saint-Denis. He is going off as currently a -222 favorite against Matt, the steamroller Frevola. Come back on him, plus 187. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah. Oh man, the hometown boy, Matt Frevola. I'll never underestimate Matt Frevola again. I remember I had to play on Lando Venata taking on Matt Frevola, and I saw not only the willpower but the skill that Frevola brought to the table in that matchup. I know he's been on the wrong side of things against Marcos Polo Reyes and also Terrence McKinney, but if you give him time to get his motor going, he will make you pay. And he's taking on an opponent in Benoit Saint Denis who is very similar in that regard. But I also believe that I think that Frevola is the heavier hitter here, clearly, and this should be the biggest pop on the entire card. I think Madison Square Garden will be the loudest it will be during this specific fight, and questions will most definitely be answered. I'll say that also. So I am not counting Matt Frevola out. I think that he has a path to victory via knockout in this matchup against Benoit Saint Denis, but I also see that Saint Denis is a powerhouse who is going to march forward, and his gas tank, it almost seems like it's unlimited the way he's bringing so many different tools to the table. Also, the way he disposed of Thiago Moises, you don't see that happen that easily. I mean, he just torched him. He literally, I felt like I was watching somebody burning alive the way Moises was just in trouble from the get-go. He couldn't handle being the lack of space. He couldn't breathe. Moises could not breathe. So in this spot, I think that Frevola is going to be ready. Can he match the pace and the tenacity of Benoit Saint Denis? I think he might be able to. I think this is going to be much closer than the line currently suggests. So this is a very, very tough fight. I'll be honest. I'm leaning towards the Saint Denis side, but I don't have the cojones to make a play on it. I think that Frevola, we've seen him prove us wrong so many times before. We were both in the building for his victory over Drew Dober, and who saw that one coming? You know, he blew. Drew Dober felt comfortable closing distance on him, and once he felt comfortable closing distance, Matt let him have it, and that was it. Granted, some folks might say it was an early stoppage, but it was great. I mean, you heard the trumpets going, and I'm sure MSG will hear them again. What do you guys think?
Lags, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I'm wearing the team shirt, of course.
Very nice.
But no, I think I see the fight kind of similar to how Mike does, that I feel like early in the fight, I think Matt definitely can land that KO. I mean, obviously much bigger hitter of the two. I think he's more defensively sound of the two. I don't think he's more durable of the two, but I think it's more or less a swing fest early in the fight. But I do think Benoit's cardio down the stretch could be issues for Matt. I could see the grappling down the stretch being an issue. But yeah, I have a small play on Frevola KO1 at plus 950. I just think that's pretty insane for what I think is probably a swing fest early, and I think it's going to be tough for Benoit to control him early.
Yeah, it is a very fascinating fight to me. Frevola and Saint Denis here, in particular because. You know, it was interesting rewatching the Dober fight. We obviously watched it in person, and you miss a lot of the finer details, you know, when you're there in the seats. And like my recollection had just been Dober pressure, gets clipped. But honestly, even leading up until the KO, you know, Frevola was doing a pretty good job baiting him into counters for most of the time they were on their feet and didn't really seem to have a ton of issues with the southpaw aspect of it. And so like looking at this, I think Frevola has a relatively large edge on the feet in this fight. If they were to stay there, obviously for 15 minutes, just because, you know, Saint Denis, he throws hard. He's got a nasty body kick, but I mean, this guy's there to be clipped. You know, Gabriel Miranda wobbled him on the feet. You know, you saw Moises land on him a few times in that fight. So, I mean, I think Matt can hold his own standing here. The problem is, and, you know, ordinarily with a spot like this, with a guy with as much hype as Saint Denis and a guy that's just proven as Frevola, I'd be very inclined to just bet Frevola and not even really think too hard about it. The problem is guys like Saint Denis, they defy a lot of rules. And by that, I mean pace grapplers. You know, they're just pace grappling. There's just not really, it is the meta, you know, like that is, it's really those are the best fighters in the UFC tend to be pace grapplers, because how do you win controlling your opponent? You're winning the fight. And if you can do that and just mat return them for 15 minutes, you tend to win fights. And so I look at this fight, and my feeling is I think the early portion of this fight, it's going to be very, very, very competitive. I like Arman Sarukian struggled to control Frevola while he was fresh. I'd be really, really surprised if Benoit can do that here. And so I think Frevola could knock him out early. I think he could have success early. The thing for me is Frevola slowed a good bit down the stretch against Arman, against like heavy grappling in that fight. Now that fight, he didn't have really a full camp for it. So I will give him credit there, but he's going to face, a similar kind of threat, and not in terms of like wrestling pedigree and ability, but just in terms of a guy who's going to come out. Can you guys hear me?
You're frozen, but we can hear you.
Okay, at least you can hear me. He's going to face a guy who's going to come out here and just go balls to the walls attacking for this entire fight. And so I do kind of think he's pretty likely to slow the later the fight goes. On top of which you'll almost certainly have BSD playing the role of the aggressor in this fight. And then, even though I think Frevola is a considerably better striker, I'd be foolish not to mention the fact that, Frevola's been knocked out a few times and hurt many times in his career. So it's not an easy fight for Frevola. I agree, Mike, that I think this line is very likely should be tighter than what it is at this moment. But at the same time, I lean the St. Denis side. I've been debating whether to play Frevola, but I'm not sure I'll get there. Lags, I am going to throw this to you real quick, and then I am going for the next fight, and then I am going to jump in and out. Does that work?
Yep, totally fine.
All right, next fight, Jessica Andrade, Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern, I believe, is minus 180 right now with the comeback on Andrade, plus 155.
So, yes, very interesting fight. Andrade obviously hasn't looked the greatest as of late. 3-fight losing streak, getting finished in all 3 of those fights. And to me, not to say really what it is, but I feel like she's just coming for a paycheck. She doesn't look too motivated in there. She doesn't look like she's showing her hardest out there. And, I and John as well have critiqued Dern's wrestling in the past, but she's shown a new level of aggression, really. Her striking's definitely improved a little bit. And to me, I feel like if Dern gets one takedown, I feel like it is the fight. So I understand her being a decent sized favorite.
It's interesting how Dern has struggled mightily to get fights to the ground. Sometimes it's a mistake by her opponent that gets made, and that's what brings the fight to the mat. So I agree with you, Legs, that Dern, she has fought very differently in the Angela Hill fight. That was a total change in level of aggression, and she was fierce. That's the word I use for Mackenzie Dern these days. And she also seems to, it's interesting, I believe both fighters are going through, or they recently went through a divorce, so that maybe played a role in lighting a fire under them. And apparently, I also question Andrade. She's been so active lately, and she's been taking these brutal losses, and she seemed to just check out of fights too, which is a cause for concern from my perspective as somebody who could potentially back Andrade here. Now, if this fight takes place on the feet at space, Andrade, we know exactly who she is. Heavy puncher who, man, it's tough. Even though Andrade looks weathered and looks like she's done, she's still, look at all the knockouts she's had on her resume. And I think that she could. Dern, she's taken some big punches in the past. She was in there against Yan Jiaonan and others. Granted, she had significant grappling success in that matchup, but here, Andrade, she can bring her grappling to the table as well, and she's a powerhouse as well. But I agree. I think Dern is the rightful favorite. I'll be picking her to win, but I haven't gotten there as far as placing a wager, because Andrade is, when she shows up and turns up, that's a fierce opponent. The Lauren Murphy fight, that was a while ago, right? But it feels like an eternity ago, the Lauren Murphy fight, where she just brutalized Lauren Murphy. Man, times, they are changing. So Mackenzie Dern's going to be the pick, but I'm just not there as far as a bet.
Yeah, so something that's kind of interesting with this fight, and I had mentioned it to Lags, I think it was early in the week or maybe last week. I was like, Andrade seems cooked to me. Line's probably fine, whatever. And then I was in the gym the other day and I was listening to a podcast about trading markets, and they mentioned recency bias. And so I started just thinking in my head about different fights on this card. And I came to this one and I was like, actually, am I committing recency bias a bit here? Is the line? Because if you think back to it, Mike, you just mentioned the Lauren Murphy fight. It seems like it was an eternity ago, but it was actually this year. And that was arguably the best performance of her career. And she went out there, landed 230 significant strikes across 15 minutes against, look, Lauren Murphy's old, but Lauren Murphy's a very good boxer. Like, Valentina Shevchenko wasn't getting off against her, the way Jessica Andrade did. I mean, that was remarkably impressive. And now, look, she's on a 3-fight losing streak now, but, she took the Blanchfield fight on short notice. And the truth is, Aaron, look, she was competitive in that fight before she got her back taken and submitted. Obviously, she got submitted by Tatiana Suarez in her last fight. Again, I mean, how much stock am I putting in that? Tatiana Suarez, potentially the best wrestler in women's MMA history. And then she got knocked out by Yan Jianan. But, I mean, the truth is, Jessica Andrade, she's never been one that's immune to getting hurt. It's happened a number of times in her career. And the way her general aggression lends itself into a fighter like Yan Jianan's strengths. And so the more I thought about it, I'm like, that might not be just an example of her, like, being washed. It might just be she had, like, 3 odd fights in a year, and now she's here at 32 years old fighting Mackenzie Dern. And don't get me wrong, if Mackenzie Dern gets on top of Jessica Andrade, it's obviously very, very dangerous. But, I look at this fight and it's like, I mean, Mackenzie Dern's not a very good wrestler. Lauren Murphy went 0 for 15 attempting takedowns against Jessica Andrade. Erin Blanchfield got in deep a couple times that she was stuffed on that are much better takedowns than we'll see from Dern here that Andrade was able to fend off in that fight. Obviously the things we remember are like the Suarez fight and the Shevchenko fight, but Shevchenko was just too big and too strong for her, far too big and far too strong for her. And Suarez, she's not getting that level of wrestling for Dern. And so, when I was taping the grappling here, something I noticed is that Dern kind of just defaults to hip tosses. But Andrade, when people go for those against her, does a really good job of shifting her weight and clasping her hands. Which isn't to say she can't get taken down, once and then be in really big trouble. Obviously, it's MMA, and Dern is going to aggressively pursue those types of takedowns. My point is more, I feel as if Dern's going to have a very hard time taking Andrade down. This is not Tatiana Suarez. And if she cannot get her down, I know Dern looked very good on the feet against Angela Hill in her last fight with that aggression. But I mean, let's all be honest here. Angela Hill is not Jessica Andrade in any way, shape, or form. If they are mixing it up and banging in the pocket here, I favor Andrade on the feet. A fairly, I don't want to say like a large margin, because Dern does hit hard and she is aggressive, and Andrade is there to be hit as well. But I would certainly favor Andrade on the feet there. And so I keep thinking about it, like, what are the chances that Mackenzie Dern subs her off one takedown? It's like, it could happen, but I almost feel like the market has over her last few fights started to overprice Dern's submission equity. People don't talk about it, but she's gone to decision in 4 straight fights. And not all of these women were like jiu-jitsu black belts, and all of those fights hit the ground. Something I really noticed with Dern's bottom game is, where Andrade has been getting caught is giving her back up, getting her back taken, and getting submitted that way. Dern's preferred method of attacking jiu-jitsu doesn't tend to be putting in a body triangle and looking for a rear naked choke. Even when she gets to mount, she's pretty much constantly looking for arm bars. And that is something that I actually think Andrade would have a little bit better of a chance to fight off than, some of the other opponents that Dern has fought. And so I think Dern has a very real chance to submit her. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'd be a fool not to say that. She is maybe the most talented jiu-jitsu practitioner in women's jiu-jitsu ever. But the truth is, she's going to have a very hard time getting her down. She's at a disadvantage on the feet. If Dern wasn't coming off her career best performance against Angela Hill, is she minus 185 against Jessica Andrade? I am not really sure. I am thinking about and leaning toward a bet on Andrade. I'm kind of hoping the line gets a bit wider, to be honest. But I just feel like we've gotten to the point where, Andrade loses to 2 top title contenders, and we're ready to write her obituary. And I'm not I'm not saying I'm not close to there, but I'm not quite there yet. I think on paper, if she can keep it upright, this is a pretty good fight for Andrade. So, I mean, I'm kind of leaning towards an Andrade bet here. But I will throw it to Mike to start us off with the co-main event. And Mike, I know you posted on Twitter today that you do have a position here. We got Tom Aspinall. He's taking on Sergei Pavlovich. The current line, Tom Aspinall minus 120. The comeback on Pavlovich plus 100. What are your thoughts?
Well, I played 1 unit. I'm risking 1 unit on Tom Aspinall at minus 115. And I know he's taking this fight on short notice. He's taking on a marauder in Sergei Pavlovich, who is, by many accounts, the real deal here. He poses a lot of problems for a lot of heavyweights. And it's going to take somebody who's slick, somebody who not only believes in themselves, but also exhibits some patience. And also, I believe, somebody who has a multiple faceted attack, whereas they could potentially take the fight to the mat if need be. Now, how does he get the fight there, Aspinall? That is the question. I believe it could potentially be the over-aggressiveness of Sergei Pavlovich. We saw in the opening minutes of the fight against Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades was actually teeing off on Pavlovich at times, but Pavlovich's chin held up and he just walked right through it. And then you saw a half-assed takedown attempt by Curtis Blades after he got rocked. He felt the power, and I believe folks who were on Blades in that fight, they were wondering what was going on here. Why didn't he just sell out for the grappling heavy approach? I do have concerns about the short notice implications here for Tom Aspinall, but Aspinall, the slicker striker, the threat of the ground game, I believe also he has much, much better head movement here. Granted, the gas tank hasn't necessarily been tested, and I don't believe this is a heavyweight bout. I think that this will likely end inside the distance, but we could throw everything out the window with what just took place last week with Gelton Almeida and Derek Lewis. So I think that if you throw out the short notice side of things here, I think that Tom Aspinall should be a larger favorite here. I know that there are some question marks here on the side of Aspinall, but from what I saw on the mat against Volkov, and also his he's so light on his feet, and the way he gets in and out of the pocket is a real threat here. So I know the power, the heavy hands of Pavlovich, he can knock anybody out at any time. But I think that he's very one-dimensional. Earlier in the week, I tweeted that Pavlovich has landed 1 leg kick through 7 UFC fights. That's his entire UFC career, and he's never landed a takedown. I don't want to say he's a one-trick pony. Sometimes that one trick works every single time out, right? And it's a real threat. You can go far. But I also think that in this current state of the heavyweight division, Tom Aspinall should be the rightful favorite here, and that's why I made a 1-unit play on him.
Lags, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, to comment on that, I mean, when you have a one trick like Sergei Pavlovich does, that power is just undeniable, really. But no, to your point, really, I mean, I find my way leaning towards the Tom way as well, just based on that grappling side. But I feel like that's really where it ends for me. Like on the feet, I think it's close to 50-50. And like Mike touched on with the cardio, I think it's an unknown on the Aspinall side. I think if anything, it's more so bad on the Aspinall side. And on the Pavlovich side, I would say it's an unknown because the only fight we've seen him go 5 rounds, it was fought at pretty much a nothing pace, and he's finished pretty much everybody in the first round or early second round since then. So I just think the cardios are a huge question mark. So I think close to pick him with slight lean with Tom with that grappling upside. It makes sense.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating fight to me. And it's one I don't have a great read on because, as you guys both touched on, both of these guys, they have a lot of early finishes. I have come around to Tom Aspinall after having some doubts about him early in his career. I mean, the bottom line is, as far as a heavyweight skill set goes, a guy who can box with the speed he does, who throws the kind of kicks he does, and also has that jiu-jitsu. I mean, you just don't find heavyweights built like that in the UFC anymore. On the other side, Pavlovich has been a guy I have been a very big doubter of. I only faded him once, but it was big with Blades. And obviously that did not go according to the plan. And I got to say, it's kind of weird because I think I don't know how much my view on Pavlovich in the aggregate changed off that fight, but I was very impressed with just how easily he was able to out-jab Blades in that fight. Because Blades is a guy whose boxing I've always rated, I've always felt has been better than what he's gotten credit for it being, his striking, and he just got absolutely eviscerated start to finish there. And I look here, and intuitively in my head, I'm like, I kind of come down where Mike does, where it's like, Blades is younger. He has a much more diverse game. He's clearly the better grappler in this spot. Intuitively to me, he should be the favorite, but on the other side, like I have this weird feeling about it. Pavlovich has this giant reach, it's the 84-inch reach. The only other person that has it is John Jones. And, Blades hasn't, or not Blades, sorry. Aspinall hasn't had to deal with somebody like that or someone who is going, most guys tend to back away from Aspinall's pressure or power because obviously he is as dynamic as he is. Pavlovich doesn't really worry about what's coming back at him. He just kind of goes into the fire, and we haven't really, and like we know he's fine with biting the mouthpiece and exchanging in the fire. We don't really know how Aspinall is going to react to that, which kind of makes me a bit nervous for the Tom side here. With that said, I would be remiss to not say, I mean, look, he's got a much more well-rounded game than Pavlovich does. And I think of the two, he's got better footwork and better ability to control the cage than Pavlovich does. Like, I don't expect Aspinall to bite the mouthpiece the way Pavlovich wants to. I think he'd be smart to try to just rip leg kicks and try to time his takedowns or rip leg kicks enough to damage him. But I don't know. I don't feel strongly about it. I feel a competitive line makes sense, especially because at heavyweight, it's tough to take guys down unless you time a perfect takedown. And so I don't have a great read on it. I have this funny feeling that Pavlovich is going to knock him out, but my gut is that Aspinall could probably be lined a little wider. So we'll see. Moving on, Lags, I will throw to you. Main event, Alex Pereira looking to get his second weight class title up at light heavyweight. He's minus 116. He's taking on Jiri Prochazka, the former champion, never lost, looking to claim his title back. He's minus 104. What are your thoughts?
Not strong ones. And I'll to be honest with you, if anybody does have strong ones on this fight, I don't really know how you could have such strong ones. To me, on the feet, both guys have big power. There's a little bit of hitability for both guys for sure. I would say that Jiri's more durable of the two. And anybody really saying that there's grappling, I don't think Jiri's grappling Alex at all, really. I don't think there's much grappling equity at all. So I feel like this is mostly a stand-up affair. Both guys have big power. I lean more on the Alex side, though, just because I do feel like those leg kicks and the body work is going to be very, very damaging, the attritional work that he does. So I find myself leaning more so on the Alex side.
Yeah, it is funny because I bet Blachowicz against Pereira in his last fight, and obviously lost that bet. But I came away from it feeling very weird about Pereira. Like, again, this is kind of weird. I feel similar to the last fight where, like, intuitively, I'm like, Jiri's probably not going to have much grappling success. And I mean, obviously, Alex is the higher kickboxing pedigree. He has a number of tools that could potentially pose issues for Jiri. But I came away from the Blachowicz fight feeling like he looked a bit less dynamic up at 205. Like, he seemed to be moving a bit slower than he normally does. He didn't have to deal with too much offense coming back at him, but it was a bit concerning for me. And on the Jiri side, Jiri's a guy who he's been a bonfire of cash for me. And Jiri, he is a guy who's like it's like his game doesn't make sense in my brain. Like, I feel like it shouldn't work, but it does. And I got to give the guy credit where it's due. I'm not going to keep, one of the mistakes I've made over the years that has cost me, a lot of money is continuing to try to double down on fading guys whose games I can't understand. Like, just because I don't understand it and like it doesn't mean it doesn't work. If it's working, clearly it's working, And so I look at Jiri and it's like, yeah, he is hittable. He can definitely be cracked. He's definitely leg kickable, but he is very, very explosive and he's very unpredictable in his movements. He's not, Izzy, you watch the Izzy fights with Alex and even the Jan fight, they're trying to have like a very technical kickboxing fight, with Alex Pereira. Jiri's not going to try to have a technical kickboxing fight with him. He's going to be in his face, darting in and out, or all the way out, or all the way in, throwing a lot of really explosive stuff. I do think Pereira knocking him out or just ripping his leg, kicking his leg off here is very, very in play. But I have, again, I don't feel strongly about it because I can see the angle on the Pereira side and I can see it on the Jiri side. I have this suspicion that Jiri's speed and athleticism is going to cause him issues, especially up at 205. We also haven't seen Pereira really get hit by a real hitter at 205 yet. And he's going to be taking 1-1 here. And then you throw in the fact that Pereira is 36 years old. He's been very, very active. You know, he got KO'd stiff earlier this year, fought Jan only a couple months ago. I don't know. I don't feel strong enough to take a side, but I have a feeling that Jiri's going to take care of business here. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I put out a breakdown a couple of weeks ago of this fight, and the first thing I said was this is an extremely volatile matchup, and I believe that. And it has to do with the unpredictability of Jiri Prochazka, who's also coming off of that shoulder injury, which has kept him on the shelf. And the other dynamic here is that the Glover Teixeira narrative, that Glover Teixeira lost his belt there, and you have Alex Pereira, who was in his corner, who has been training with him in Danbury, getting him prepared for this moment. They feel like they may know what Prochazka brings to the table. But the reality is, I don't even know if Jiri knows. He lives in the moment and reacts appropriately. And the UFC debut of Jiri Prochazka, I remember that there were glaring holes there that you saw from Prochazka, but he came out the other side victorious. The Dominic Reyes fight also, he was within a strike or two of being brutally finished, yet he came out with the most devastating finish I think we've seen in years. And then also to submit Glover Teixeira shows you that the guy is not willing to give up. And just when you count him out, he comes back in a way that you didn't necessarily predict that would be the most likely outcome. So what in my breakdown, I touched on that. I think that Pereira, he's used to folks who will stand in front of him and match him, and he can get reads on his opponent. He's going to have a difficult time doing that against Prochazka here, and I think that ultimately may end up being his downfall. But also up at 205 pounds, I think this is a little different element too, because Pereira may be a little bit more durable than we saw down at middleweight. So it is a toss-up in my eyes. I personally lean slightly towards the Prochazka side, but I can't deny that Prochazka, his striking defense at times is atrocious. He just leaves himself wide open to be countered, and you do not want to be countered by Alex Pereira. And also the leg kicks too. There's a lot of issues that could potentially be had on both sides of this fight. But I think that one thing that may end up happening is somebody's lights will likely be shut off during that bout.
Yeah, I thought you put it perfectly, saying a lot of times Jiri doesn't know what he's doing either. Like, it just seems like he's the king of improvisation. Like, it seems like that's how he fights. It's a very interesting dynamic. Like, to your point, it's like Alex is a kickboxer who wants to make reads against the guy who just does. He just kind of does whatever, like, his energy in the moment dictates him to do, you know? So it's a fascinating fight. I'm very excited for it. Guys, thank you for coming out tonight. Mike, I want to thank you a lot for joining us. Guys, you can follow Mike on Twitter at Mike's MMA Picks. Mike, you want to shout out your show, where they can find you, all that good stuff?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate this.
Absolutely.
I know we've met multiple times at different live events before, and we'll meet again in the future. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike's MMA Picks. I also have a YouTube channel, Mike's MMA Picks also, and I'll be putting out content from now to Kingdom Come. So I hope everybody cashes all their tickets, and I appreciate you having me on in the lead up to such a tremendous fight card. Should be awesome.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And guys, please, if you like the show, drop a like and subscribe. We'd appreciate it. You can follow Lags on Twitter at Danny_Lags and myself at MMA Fox. Thanks for coming out tonight, guys. Good luck this weekend. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.